Thank you all for tuning in. The following is a presentation of Bald Spots Productions. Be sure to like, comment, and share. Subscribe, follow, whatever it is you've got to do to kick that algorithm into gear and help us reach more people.
Yes, it is I, your humble host, Bill Hatch, coming to you live from the Palatial Home Studios of Bald Spots Productions here in the beautiful city of Malden, Missouri. Joining me from, not too far from St. Louis, Missouri, so almost close enough to do this in person, but still a more than acceptable safe social distance, is my guest for today, Judy Ryan. Hi, Judy. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Phil. I'm glad to be here.
Glad to have you here. Now, let's see. You're coming just outside of St. Louis, Missouri. So you're just a few hours away from where we are in the rural boot heel of Missouri. So people keeping track on their maps can go, oh, okay, that's where everybody is.
Yeah, I'm actually in a county of St. Louis called Maryland Heights, so it's part of St. Louis. So.
Okay, great. Okay, so like a suburb kind of thing.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay. Usually when I start everything off, I usually do that by asking, who are you reading right now?
Oh gosh, I'm reading a book called The Power Code, which is by Katty Kay, and her co-author is named Claire. I can't remember her last name, but I'm reading it because it's about how women see power differently than men, and how that we need. And it was interesting because in the interview, she said that until we change the definition of power inside of culture, from being more of a power over power under kind of dynamic, women will never be able to be in equality with men. And I just thought that was so interesting because that's the kind of work I do, is transforming culture from power over power under to win-win, more collaborative use of power. So that's one book. And I'm also reading one by Gabor Mate called The Myth of Normal. Those are my more serious books. And then, of course, I read all kinds of crazy fun books also.
Hey, nothing wrong with that. In fact, doing some reading for fun is good for refreshing the mind and getting some new ideas flowing. But what are some key takeaways that you've had from the Power Code? Was the first one, the one about women in power?
Yeah, well,
women
the
and
Power
power.
Code I've just started. Probably the book that I just most recently finished that I got a lot out of was called Rejection Proof. And it's by an Asian person. I can't recall his name, but it was such a good book. I wish all my kids had it when they were younger because it has some really funny parts in it, but it also is very much about overcoming your fear of being rejected. And the author, he opens the book. I'll just say a little bit about it. He opens the book about how he was always this entrepreneurial mind. And he had an idea to create these tennis shoes that had wheels in them. And he took it to his uncle, and his uncle said, just the idea. And his uncle said, oh, that's silly. You need to focus on school. And then a few years later, the Wheelies company came along, and they're a multi-billion-dollar company or whatever.
Yeah.
And then he really learned to start looking at rejection and what does it actually mean. And at the end of the book, he goes back to his uncle and says, did you really think my idea was, or that I was silly for being sort of a dreamer? And he said, no, I loved that about you. I just didn't think the idea would make it. So he learned that he shouldn't take that kind of feedback so seriously. He could have tried some prototypes and, got other opinions. And it just makes you realize how many people maybe don't live into their potential because they get a rejection and then they don't stay the course,
Yeah.
So that was it's a fun and very interesting book, not a hugely long book. It's about 6 hours, and it was great.
That's not bad. Get that definitely get that done over a weekend. No, that's awesome. Yeah, rejection, definitely. The people who say no, it's not always a good thing. And being held back by by others, by their the lack of vision of those around you, can definitely hurt the prospects you have in life.
Well, what
That's an
was more
awesome
important
takeaway.
to me, what he said that I think was more important than that was focusing on himself to learn how to be rejection proof, to actually seek
Okay.
out rejection. He went through 100 experiences of rejection to learn how to be comfortable in rejection and how to overcome rejection, by just
Okay.
not resisting it and not being afraid of it. And that to me is the bigger takeaway. Not that other people can
Yeah.
stop us,
Okay.
but that we can stop ourselves.
Right, right. Well, we're really the only ones, we're the ones in control of things like that. People sometimes say, "Oh, that person took away my joy," or something like. No, you gave up your joy because you heard
Right.
something you took too seriously. Um,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I gave up my dreams because of so and so. No, you chose to give up your dreams.
Right.
I can totally see that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's always choices to be had in this life, and
Yeah, and
yeah.
I read a book by Byron Katie a couple years ago, and she's really interesting, very interesting person. But she said that the best prayer we could have is, "Please release me from the need for love, approval, and acceptance from others." And I say that every single day. In fact, I have this thing on my refrigerator that talks about you don't have to be anybody but other than who you are. You don't have to be this or that, and you don't have to
Right.
stay around people that don't accept you as you are, because I think it really inhibits us. When it doesn't mean we
Yeah.
don't need love, approval, and acceptance, but trying to get it from people is very transactional. And I
Yeah.
would rather be myself and then notice where love, approval, and acceptance is freely given, as opposed to trying to get it from anybody, or,
Right.
or reacting to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't have to wait for someone else to say go before we start something. You know,
Yes.
and yeah, you're right. I mean, having love, acceptance, and approval, and all of those things definitely makes you feel good. But not having those shouldn't stop you
Right.
from following your dream, your goals, your destiny, if you will.
Yes.
If you want to go universal grandiose, your destiny.
Yes. Right.
But yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, we all have a purpose in this life, and a way we can fit in with fit the grand plan of everything, and and make the world a better place. And that needs to be what our focus is, I think. Um,
Yeah.
Now let's see about getting to some of your stuff. Now you're a thought leader on cultural transformation, and tell me a little bit
Hmm.
about that. How do you transform culture?
Well, it's kind of a challenging thing in some ways, because I've been doing this for over 30 years. I've had my own company for a little over 20 years, but changing
Wow.
mindset is challenging because we all have our own idea of what is culture. What is healthy
Hmm.
culture? What is what? How do you get healthy culture? How do you implement it? What does it mean to develop people? Does that mean develop everybody? And so I look at the word culture, even in a home or a school or a workplace, almost like the word parenting. You could have 10 parents in a room and ask them what is healthy parenting and get 10 very different answers. So I was introduced to a particular model back in the 80s, and now I'm dating myself, but it was so life transforming for me. I was able to really raise my children very unconventionally. I have 5 kids. I had 4 really close, and then one that slipped in under the wire 10 years later. But by the time they were 4 years old, they knew how to run a family meeting, because we would have a family meeting every week and we would pass a talking stick. And everybody learned how to both lead and follow,
Wow.
including me, who's kind of a dominant leader type person. I had to learn to not
Mhm.
steamroll my children when they were in the leadership position,
Yeah.
and it really, I think, served them in becoming critical thinkers, and becoming people that could be agile in any situation. If they were needed to step into the lead, they could, but they also could step into the follower position. And that's what's often lacking in people's ability to collaborate or innovate, is being
Mhm.
able to be flexible that way.
Okay.
We
Yeah.
also,
Oh.
I was just going to say, we also learned how to correct our children when they were misbehaving in a way that
Mhm.
didn't involve punishment, bribery, permissiveness, or shaming them. And that was a
Okay.
huge advantage. So, a lot of what I was learning and applying as a parent educator and a parent started healing my own internal experiences in life that weren't all that horrific, but a lot of people have small t trauma just from the way they were raised. And
Mhm.
and that's becoming more and more known. And so when I really started to see the effects of this on myself and my family and the people that I was teaching this to, I realized this is what is needed everywhere. And that's how I started to get the vision to take this out to all kinds of different organizations. And that's what I've been doing full time since 1998, and as my own
Okay.
company since 2002. So that's a little
Wow.
bit about how I got started. But I think you said, I forget exactly what your question was. So please
How
feel free to ask.
how do you transform culture?
Well, a
um,
couple of
when
things.
you're going to, oh, mhm.
No, you go ahead.
No, I was going to say, one question that popped into my head is, do you work to transform culture top down or bottom up? Is
I would
cultural
say
transformation? Hmm.
I would say both. One of the things that I
Okay.
was mentioning, and there's three things I'm always thinking: what kind of model are you adopting? Who is
Hmm.
trained in that model and applies that model, and how is that model implemented? So the middle question is what I'm hearing you ask: who is involved? Is it top down? Is it bottom up? It's
Right.
actually everyone simultaneously. So we use
Okay.
an implementation process that I'm happy to describe to you, but it involves, like, if we have a pilot project with a company, we always
Hmm.
ask that it be mixed levels. So sometimes
Okay.
the senior team will say, well, we don't want to bring the staff in with our training. We're a little rough around the edges. We don't want them to see that. And I'm like, no, that is what they need to see. We all need to be
Hmm.
human together, just like I did with my family, where everybody was equally as humans, very equally had a voice at the table. And also was called upon to strengthen their leading and following agility. So our model is a fully distributive one. And sometimes when
Okay.
people think about leadership, they just think about developing the top leaders. But in
Right.
ours, everybody is developed at the same time on purpose. And when people balk at that at first, I'll be like, well, why would you think that's not possible? We all have cell phones nowadays, at least most people. Most of us have
Hmm.
a computer. So why is it impossible for all of us to be developed together?
Right.
And that's really where, so it is top down, but it's also middle out, and it doesn't exclude either party.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. No, I can definitely see that as a good way to go because everyone's leading someone, and
Yes.
whether that's just the bully pulpit kind of leadership where you don't have like an official position of power, but you lead by your example to others on your same level or even those above you who might see, wow, this is a great way to do things, and
Yes.
of
I mean,
course,
my kids used to bring their little friends from the neighborhood and say, will you help us with the thermometer tool or with the dialogue tool? Because they knew all these tools and they wanted us to kind of support them
mhm,
teaching it to their friends. That they were leading, even though they were kids, and they could easily support somebody else in leading something. So
sure,
you're so right that we are all leading at different times, even if we don't have
yeah.
the title or the salary, right, Bill?
Yeah, yeah, no kidding. Um, Yeah, the responsibility and the money that hopefully comes along with it.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And the
Well, what?
fulfillment of it. So, no, you
No,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. Well, I was going
I
to
was
ask,
just going to
how
say,
did you?
you know, if you want.
We're going to keep doing this, aren't we? You go. I'm Zip.
No, because you're the one asking the question, so I want you to be able to get them in.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just going to ask, how did you first get into cultural transformation and leadership development and all of that?
Well, the way I got into it is I studied Alfred Adler's psychology model. And in it, people that have a psychology degree can sometimes remember
Hmm.
who he is. But I read a book about him about 5 years ago. In fact, there's an article that is out on LinkedIn right now that my intern, publishes my articles. I have about 250 of them. But this one was called The Courage to be Disliked, which was a book that two Japanese authors wrote about Alfred Adler about 5 years ago. And when
Okay.
I read that book, it's kind of a good way that they're trying to help lay people understand what Adler was about. But they said in the foreword of that book that he was at least 100 years ahead of his time. And he would be about
Wow.
50 now, 100 years ago. So I felt that way the first time I learned about his work, because I thought if we really understand what he's saying about human nature, we would never go for win-lose. Because he was the one that coined the phrase inferiority complex. How we come into this world feeling as though we're powerless, because we are when we're really little, but we start to make interpretations about ourselves based on the way that power has been treated. We have been treated in our power. So what I love about Adler's work is to be able to take that and focus on how do you celebrate, expand, and guide power within people so that it's not underutilized and it's not abusive. That's really what I think is missing a lot in our society, is that people haven't really been, in our well-intentioned ways of trying to create good citizens, we've overpowered them to get them there. We've used threats. We've used dangling carrots. We've used, oh, I'm so disappointed in you, or, oh, go make me proud, or, oh, let me do it for you. And all of those things have really kept people from using their personal power and even trusting it and feeling good about it and knowing how to use it for good. So that was kind of the first, for me, when I learned about Adler, I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. But I don't think it's been super powerful in the world yet because we're so mired in win-lose. Now, I do think the world is trying to shift, at least in the United States. I think we're trying to shift into more of a win-win, but some folks are holding on to win-lose with a death grip. And that's the reason why it's very, Brene Brown, I don't know if you know who she is, but she's a really famous author and speaker. If you get a chance, you might want to look up her TED Talk. She's amazing.
Okay.
But she's very, very well known for her conversations about shame and vulnerability. And she says that she's invited to speak all around the world, but because she's funny and she's really smart, she's really research oriented. And she said that people will say to her when they hire her, Brene, you're so awesome, you're so funny, but how about you not talk about that shame stuff? It's a little dark and it makes people uncomfortable. And her response to that is, that's got to be our number one priority, because if we don't address that, we can't really get anywhere. And that was Adler's main thing, is really understanding the inferiority complex and how it separates people and how it causes struggles inside people and between people. And so that's why I latched onto it, Bill, because I thought she's right. Like, I did that before I even knew who Brene Brown was, because she's very recent. But she's really on this same pathway that Adler was on. I just think our society is starting to open to it now.
Yeah. And it's one of the things I think makes it so difficult to get out, to break free from that, is people think they're doing a good thing when they tell you that, oh, that's silly, or that's impractical, or you shouldn't be doing that, you should be focused on school, or what have you. and or getting a job, depending on where you are. And I've talked on the show with guests before about how when we're kids, everything is possible. We can grow up. We can imagine that we can grow up to be a cowboy or an astronaut or a cowboy astronaut. You whatever it is we may want to, we may imagine ourselves growing up, and then as we get older, people tell us that things are less and less possible. And by the time we're in our teen years, none of the fun stuff that we'd imagined ourselves doing are possible anymore, because that's
Right.
what we've been told. We've been
Well, not only have we been
trained to
told,
not see the possibilities.
we have been trained and conditioned, but we've also seen it modeled where people don't believe that
Yeah.
more is possible. So it's a
Right.
whole combination. It's kind of a whole societal thing. Which kind of leads me. Do you mind if I tell you a story that I often tell
Sure.
people?
I love stories.
Is that going to interrupt your flow?
No, it's good.
Okay, so a lot of times when we go to big conferences and we're speaking in front of executives and everything, we still tell this story as an opening story. And it's a real story that happened within our organization. We had a teacher who was out in Pacific, Missouri, and she was the only one using our school reform model, because we worked in a lot of school reform projects where we worked with parents, teachers, administrators, and students and part of the neighborhood all simultaneously, which was a huge, wonderful thing. But in her school, she was the only one that had learned about our model, had adopted it in her classroom of eighth graders and multiple classrooms of eighth graders, and was struggling with how to make sure she was doing it well. Because in our model, it's about how do you help kids and adults learn to be good at managing their relationships, managing their productivity, managing how engaged and enthusiastic they are, and managing their own progress, which required them to work in classroom meetings, but also work on themselves. Things that really are about how do I get along in the world beyond just my intellect. And so she asked me one day, she said, would you come and sit in on one of my classroom meetings? Because I know my primary role is to transfer responsibility to kids, but I don't always see exactly how to do that. So I said, okay. So I came to her classroom one day, and into the classroom meeting comes this boy, or right before the classroom meeting, and he says, I'm being bullied by my homeroom teacher. And she said, well,
Wow.
put it on the classroom meeting agenda. So when it was time for him to talk, he said, yeah, we have this new pledge that the school has adopted, and it's called the Peace Pledge. And you're supposed to put your hand on your heart and say, I pledge to use my words and actions for peace. And he said, I don't have a problem with that pledge. I like the pledge. He said, what I don't like is that the teacher did this and glared at all of us and said, if I catch any of you not doing the pledge, you're going to get a detention. And she was dead serious. Isn't that kind of ironic, Bill, just as an aside?
Wow.
That she's going to hammer into their head peace, right? So he was upset about this, and he said, I don't think it's right that she's trying to force this. And so the teacher looked at me like, okay, how do I help him pick up responsibility for what's happening? Because he's the one asking for help. And she said, will you show me? And I said, okay. So I said to the boy, do you want peace in the school? And he said, yes, I do. And I said, do you want peace with the teacher who's bullying you? I didn't pull any punches. I said, she's bullying you. Do you want peace with her? And he said, yes. And I said, good, then I can help you. Because I know that my mission is to create a world where people love their lives. And if he's trying to get back at her or something and he's not really having a peaceful intent, I'm probably not the person to help him with that. So I said to him, are you willing to look at where you're doing more with her? And he said, me, I'm the one being bullied. And I said, I know, but you're the one saying I'm taking a stand for peace and even peace with her. And you're the only one asking for help. She's not here. So are you willing to even just look? And he said, okay. I said, do you ever say bad things about her behind her back? And he said, well, yeah, I hate her. I said, anything warlike about hate and gossip? And he says, yeah, I guess, I said, okay. Do you ever try to go to her when things are calm and have a reasonable conversation with her about what you're thinking and feeling? And he said, well, no, we're all afraid of her. And I said, did you know that fear is attack? And he said, no, what do you mean? And I said, if a dog comes running up to you and it's barking and it's growling and its, ears are down and it's hostile, if you get more afraid, does that dog get more hostile or less hostile? And he said, more hostile. And I said, yeah, why? And he said, I don't know. I never really thought about it. And I said, the reason the dog gets more hostile is because you being afraid of the dog, you have the dog in the monster box. You have the dog in the enemy camp, and the dog feels that and is going to return the favor. I said, that's what we do to each other as humans when we fear each other and treat each other like we're monsters. And he said, and I said, so now that you see that you've been doing hate, gossip, and attack through fear, what do you want now? And he said, well, now I want to go to her and have a reasonable conversation, but I'm not really quite sure how to go about it. And I said, well, isn't it great you have 20 other classmates, a teacher, and myself here today for you to kind of figure that out? There's still 20 minutes left for you guys to start working on that. And he said, oh, that would be great. And he asked his, classmates, will you guys help me? And some of the kids, this is the part that really got me. Some of the kids said to him, I'll go with you. I've been doing war with her too, and I didn't know it. And then at the end of the day, the teacher said to me, you can see how I love these kids and how I'm a good teacher. But she said, at the end of this year, I want to put in my notice and come work with you on the school reform work that you're doing, which we were doing at that time, because I'm the only one in the school doing this. And it's almost like everything I'm doing, they're working opposing it. And she said, and yet we have these signs in our halls, respect, accountability. And she said, it's about as crazy as saying math is crucial and reading is essential and having no math or reading class. And she said, we're really not doing them any services just by teaching them reading, writing, and arithmetic if we don't teach them how to manage their relationships, manage their productivity, manage their engagement. So what I learned from that, Bill, was not only did she start to understand what does it mean to transfer skills to that student, because I could have pampered him and said, oh, you poor thing, we'll go and beat up that big bad bully teacher, which is just going to keep him small.
Right.
But to be able to help him to see how he has power and he has purpose and intention. He has purpose with peace. And what I also really saw in action was that when one person raises their responsibility, everybody's responsibility starts going up. And the same is true when it goes down. When there's blame and victim consciousness, more of that happens. So sometimes people will say, well, why are you telling us about eighth graders? We're a company. Well, if we can do this with eighth graders and below, and I can do it with my 4-year-olds, running family meetings and gaining their sense of empowerment and their connection and their contributions, then why wouldn't you be able to in your organization? So that's kind of why we use something very simple like that. That was a long story, Bill.
That's okay. We have time. No, that's great. I love that. People aren't often trained how to go about making this change. It's just like, we need change. Go out and change. Go do it.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And we'll give you a workshop, and then you're supposed to know how to apply it.
Yep. Give you 60 minutes of training and of a workshop, and here's your little booklet and your little test that you do at the end of the hour, and now you're an expert.
Exactly. That's why one of the hardest things that we have to overcome is we have a very specific implementation, and it's not a fast food kind of implementation. Because most people want instant gratification when they want change.
Right.
And you probably know in your faith work and all of that change does not happen overnight. It requires some real significant going out of our way to have it.
Yeah, change can really be a lifetime journey, for sure.
Yeah,
and,
we don't see it as a lifetime to get the basics, but definitely it takes more than a 1-hour program or something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
So if you want, I'll tell you a little bit about how we implement and some stories around that if you want.
That'd be great.
Okay, you share this? This is the direction
Yeah.
you're okay with?
Yeah, no, this is fine. I usually try
Okay.
to do this as a conversation, free flowing, and yeah, because a lot of times people get the standard kind of questions, and then the people watching, they're like, "Oh, well, I already know all this stuff, so let's go for something a little different," and
Yeah, I
so
think
people
this
can
will
get
be
to
a
know you
little
differently.
different. I think this will, yeah, or that they can think a little bit differently possibly about
Yeah.
this. So when we go into a company or an organization and we work on changing their culture, we usually start with a first big project, like maybe 20,
Mhm.
30 people. And we do what's called an immersive process. And it's based on what they have learned in education called flipped classrooms or flipped training. Have you ever heard of that, Bill?
Mm-mm. No, I haven't.
Okay. So what they found, excuse me, I don't know what's going on with my voice today. What they found in education was that if you taught students and you just lectured to them,
Hmm.
they only learned what they needed to learn for the test and maybe a couple months later, and then they wouldn't
Sure.
retain it. So what they found is if they would give them an assignment that they would go home and do, it could be a video that they would watch and fill out a workbook or a packet of some sort, and had to reflect on it and be critically thinking about it. And then came back to the classroom the next day and talked about it with their co-students and had some somewhat guided conversation amongst their peers, but with oversight from the teacher, they
Hmm.
would really start understanding the concepts and things they were learning. They would understand why they were relevant, how to apply them. And they found that when they would quiz them a year later or more, they would still remember what they had learned. So
Wow.
that's called flipped classrooms or flipped training.
Okay.
So what we do
Okay.
in
Yeah,
our
I,
model
I
is
did
like
that
that.
in I did some of that in college, and where
Okay, so you kind
we
of
the
know.
students. Yeah, I know the concept. I just hadn't heard flipped classrooms before.
Yeah, that's what it's called. It's called flipped training, flipped classrooms.
Okay.
So what we do is we do that kind of like on steroids. And so what that means is we have like 11 touch points where people engage. They start by doing an individual online module, then they fill out their workbook, and then they do a post-training survey where they're asked questions about the relevance and understanding and how would they apply it. Then they come together in small employee-led groups, and those employee-led groups are 10 or less, and they will have those mixed levels, like maybe the CEO's in there with the receptionist, with a mid-level person, that sort
Okay.
of thing.
Hmm.
And every month they go and they use a group module to review what they learned in the individual module, and the leader of that particular group guides them through conversing about it and even practicing some of the tools that they're learning. And then they are already partitioned into mentoring pairs, and those are reverse. So the CEO could be mentoring the receptionist, and then the receptionist returns the favor. Because in our mentoring, it's not about skill or knowledge; it's about following a process that helps each other, excuse me, become aware of what's going on and what steps they need to take to fix something. Just like that boy in the 8th grade story.
Hmm.
He was helped to look at a situation, figure out what he wanted, and then practice and then plan on how he was going to go fix it, right? That's the hard part. It's easy to have awareness. It's not as easy to manage ourselves and to change ourselves in our behavior.
Hmm.
So it's so we meaning LifeWorks Systems, we provide all of the individual training and the group modules and all the workbooks and leader guides and phone apps, but we sit in on the initial projects and prepare those employees for leading the groups, and then we sit in on those small groups, and then we sit in on the mentoring the first month of everybody, and then we take like small subsections and on a rotational basis. So by the time the year-long process is done, they know how to continue doing the mentoring properly. They know how to apply the tools properly. They understand the foundation of it all. And eventually, if the company is large or the organization, they may train people to be those internal oversight mentors, so that eventually all they do is buy the training and the workbooks and everything. And we're out of the picture as far as our direct involvement. So that's
Right.
about 4.5 hours a month that everybody does for a year. Now, 4.5 hours
Wow.
to me does not sound that bad, but for some people, that's a really big deal.
Yeah.
So I was working with this company that had about 550 people. And the CEO knew Adlerian psychology. He really wanted this. He was working in a long-standing, over 70-year-old organization that needed to be revamped on every level. And so he knew enough to know that culture needed to be revamped. So he hired us to come in and work with his 20 top executives. That's not the way we wanted him to do it because we like the mixed levels, but he wanted them to be trained first. About a month and a half in, he says, you know what? I don't want them to have to do this mentoring. I don't want them to have to do homework. I just want you to lead 2-hour sessions every other week on the content. Excuse me, Bill. And,
No problem.
and just, help us understand the whole process, all the tools and everything. And so we did that over every other week for 6 months. But instead of it just being with his 20 executives, he wanted everybody from supervisor all the way up to executives. It was like 50 people. So I want to tell you this story because it really is a true story and it outlines why the immersive process is so important. Because I told him, I said, okay, I can do that. Excuse me. But your people will not retain what they're learning and they may not even feel confident in applying it. And he says, I know, I'm okay with that. So the very first session, one of the tools that we teach is one of 2 tools to stop gossip. So Bill, if I was doing this tool with you, it's called a mind trust, and you would do it back with me if you wanted to. And in the mind trust, I would say to you, Bill, I promise you, I commit to you that I won't say bad things about you behind your back. I commit to you that if I have a problem with you, I will come to you directly and work it out with you. I also promise you, if somebody comes to me and starts to say bad stuff about you, I'll stop them right away, very politely, and I'll say, hey, I've got a mind trust with Bill. I don't let anybody say bad things about him to me. And the 4th promise is I'll try to get that person to go to you directly so that they don't hold on to that grudge or take it to other people. Now, those are 4 really big commitments. If you even sat with them for a while, they're not all that easy, some of them. But when I taught this to the group, I said, what do you guys think of this tool? And they said, oh, we love that tool. Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. And I said, would you be willing to go to one another on Zoom or in person, all 50 of you, and say that commitment to each other? And they were like, yes. So that's what they said they did. 2 weeks later, they told me they all did that. So at the end of the program, one of the directors calls me, and he's over 8 managers that were part of this leaders process, right? And he says to me, boy, we have had some really hard relationship problems, and we love all these tools you've given us, but we're still not really sure how to use them completely. Would you come in and spend a couple of days with us kind of applying what we've learned? And I said, well, I'm going to be talking to your chief financial officer today. I'll find out if there's budget for that. So I called her up, and this is what she said to me, Bill. This is where it gets kind of funny. She says, oh, he really needs help. He was saying terrible things about me in a meeting, and 2 of his people were so upset they came and told me what he said about me. So I say to her, oh, did you ask them if they stopped him because don't they have a mind trust with you? Because remember, everybody had been through this mind trust thing. And she goes, oh, no, I didn't even think of that. And I go, well, then I guess you didn't ask them if they went directly to him with the problem, because didn't they promise to him, if I have a problem with you, I'll go to you and talk to you about it. And she said, no, I didn't think of that. And I said, did you think to go to him when you knew he was saying bad things about you? Because you have a promise to him that you're going to go to him if you have a problem with him. And she goes, no, I went and tattled on him to his boss. And his boss was at the meeting too, and he didn't stop him either. And then she goes, what is wrong with all of us? Isn't that hilarious?
Yes. Well, if it wasn't so sad, it'd be hilarious.
It is sad, but it also makes the point, because I said to her,
yeah,
it's not that there's something wrong with you. When you got the tool, it was almost like I gave you a tennis racket and you thought it made you a tennis player. And it doesn't. Even if you had a racket, a real tennis racket, You still have to watch the game a few times, understand how to play it, start falling in love with it, get out on the court, learn how to, build muscle memory and get good at it. And then you can say, I'm a tennis player. But if you just learn tools and you never put them into motion and you don't even really understand what's the fullness of them and what you're really saying yes to, do you see how it's going to be meaningless? So, Bill, now we share that story when we do kickoff sessions because we want people to understand that we don't ask them to give up 4.5 hours a month for no good reason. Because it's the repetition and the different ways that they're engaging with the content and the tools and the mindset shifts that allow it to become real for them. And when it becomes real for them, they keep it going for long, long, long time.
So yeah, no, that's great. That's a great story. I'm glad you shared that with everyone. Teaching someone how to teach is definitely better than teaching someone just here's the stuff, blah, and just throwing it up. Teaching to teach is definitely the better way of getting things through to people.
Yeah.
Wow. Let's see here. What else do I want to ask you about? Exceptional outcomes. Oh yeah, what's the name of the business?
It's Life
Again.
Work Systems.
Life Work Systems. Okay, and it's Life Work Systems, right? And it's lifeworksystems.com.
That's right.
Great.
I always like to say there's systems that make life work.
Yep, got to have ways to make it memorable. Let's see, and you said that develop in every role at every age. So yeah, you work with all ages and all roles. That's awesome.
Yeah, I would have to say when we're working with school reform, we're working with parents and teachers, and they are then doing things to pass that down to their families, just like I did. When we're working, and one of the projects we did was a huge project that was, well, I had a couple really interesting things happen. One of them was because I had been a parent doing this, and a lot of my friends didn't know what I was doing, and my kids' teachers didn't know what I was doing, and they'd be like, well, why aren't you giving your kids $1 every time they get an A, and we weren't doing all that. I had this vision that I wrote down that was the schools and the parents all learning the same concepts and tools, and the kids, like that 8th grade classroom, and even some of the surrounding community. Because that's my belief. Even if you have something like police brutality, you don't just go and try to change the police. You change the whole system that is in the community that causes the problem, because it's not a people problem as much as it is a system problem.
Right.
So I wrote this vision down, Bill, because I'm a really big believer that when you write down something that you want that is truly aligned with who you are, not just some kind of made up thing, it often starts coming into being before you even do anything about it. So at that time, we were working with the St. Louis City school districts, and they had 110 schools at that time. A lot of really tough schools where you had metal detectors, when you would go into the schools.
Wow.
And we were doing these like little one-day professional development programs. That was all we could get in to do, not only in the St. Louis City district, but other districts. So one day I go into the headquarters, into the office of this one woman that was over all of the alternative education, which are mostly for kids that are struggling or special needs or their behavioral problems and that sort of thing. And I went in because I was in the area, and I just said, I just want to thank you for all your advocacy. And she said to me, oh, I'm so glad to see you. I've been hearing good things about your work. She said, I have a question for you. What would you do if money was no issue? And I said, and this was in the early days of my company. And I said, oh, that's easy. I've already just written that down. And I just rattled off what I just said, where the parents and the teachers and the students would all learn this, And she goes, oh, well, here's a $300,000 grant application for the Walmart company. It's called Walton Foundation. She goes, it's due in 2 days. I don't have time to write anything. She goes, but I like what you just said. So if you think you could write it down well, I'll sign off on it if I like what you've written. Well, I'd never written a grant application. I'm a for-profit company. Normally, you don't even get to go after grants. But they were the nonprofit fiscal agent. So I wrote a 40-page document, Bill. It was probably $600,000 worth of services, but I was so excited. I just crammed it full. And we worked with 6 schools for multiple years because we won that award in about a month. We had a $300,000 budget. And then this was before we were online. So we had real instructors and everything live, working with the students, working with the parents, working with the educators and the administrators. And then somebody else came to me and said, oh, you should go to talk to the mayor's office because they're collecting these taxes called Proposition K dollars for kids, K for kids. And one of their initiatives was to help more high school students stay in school and graduate. Because in the inner city of St. Louis, a lot of the kids, not only do they not go to college, they don't finish high school. It's really sad. Yeah. So they wanted somebody to bring in a solution. So we partnered with a nonprofit, and then we won an $800,000 grant to do the same kind of thing that we had done with these elementary and middle schools with the high schools. And we actually won an award called the Vanguard Award for Innovation because we had to prove that we moved the number of kids that were dropping out, improved the amount of kids that were staying in school and graduating. And it was so powerful. And we almost had a deal with Build-A-Bear. Before their founder sold off the company in 2011, we had a meeting with Maxine Clark because their HR director believed in our model, used it with her own kids. And she said, oh, I wish I could get you into Build-A-Bear. And I said, I have a better idea. What if we pitch a new cause marketing and new profit center to Build-A-Bear called Build a Healthy Family, Build a Healthy School? And so we did a mock-up of all of that, a presentation. And we took it to Maxine Clark, and she said yes to it. She was so excited. And afterwards, the HR director said, I'm really surprised she did that because they were still recovering from the 2008 recession. And she said they were only $100,000 away from being in the red still. Well, so she was excited and shocked that Maxine said yes. But about 2 weeks later, Maxine ended up selling the company, I guess because it was in financial difficulties. And then the new CEO did not have the same vision. But I just recently did parents as teachers presentations that came out of the blue. Like I wasn't even trying to work with them. And now they want to do a pilot project because I did 3 presentations for them. And then I had done a mental health talk globally, and a school in the UK said, oh my gosh, this is the kind of culture model we've been looking for in the schools here, not only for the 2 schools I'm involved in, but I want to change the schools all across the UK. Now, I don't know that we're going to get that. We've got a proposal out to them, but they're trying to find the funding. But that's kind of how I see the power of a vision. It keeps on giving, even when you're not focused on it. And it's not like the only thing we work on is not education and family, but it is a part that keeps coming back around again. And I love it. So I'd like to influence children before they get to adults,
Yep. The older they get, the harder it can be to get the lessons into them. I've noticed that myself in some of my leadership training that I've done. But yeah, that's great. Life work systems that make life work. Lifeworksystems.com, and go check it out and see all the things that Judy has to offer. Definitely a great thing to support, and I think we've pretty much worn out our time. But we don't want to be too long.
Thank you for advocating for me. I really appreciate it, Bill.
And no, my pleasure. You're definitely doing some good work, and something that the world can definitely use. So I certainly
Thank
hope
you.
hope this helps get the word out. And
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
oh, no problem. Let's see, before we go, do you have anything to say to the nice people? Any final words?
Well, I would just say that I believe everything happens for a reason. And if you're listening and you are feeling discouraged about all of the struggles in the world right now, whether they're at your job or in your family or just in the society, just know that there are people out there like Bill, like me, who want you to love your life and have real solutions for helping you get there. And don't ever give up hope, because there are a lot of good people in the world that want to make this place better. So that's all I would
Yeah.
want to say, Bill.
Okay. Great. Well, you've said it.
Yep.
It's out there. You can't take it back.
I wanna.
Well, I definitely want to thank you for being on the show, Judy. And I'd like to thank all of our listeners and viewers, however you've took this episode, for tuning in. Be safe out there. Remember to wash your hands and stay tuned for the ending credits.
Thank you all for tuning in. This has been a presentation of Bald Spots Productions. I'd like to thank our producer, my beloved mother, Eileen Hatch.
I, of course, am your humble host.
I'd like to thank my special guest, Judy Ryan.
Support the show if you feel so led over on patreon.com. We're known as Bald Spots Pro. Don't you dare miss YWL Online. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, and wherever fine podcasts are offered.
Be sure to tune in next time when my special guest will be Ed Cohen. Be sure to like, comment, and share. Subscribe, follow, whatever it is you've got to do to kick that algorithm into gear and help us reach more people.
If you or someone you know needs support now, call or text 988 or chat 988lifeline.org. That is the suicide and crisis lifeline here in the United States.